to HomeWord. I'm Jim Burns. Let me ask you a question, or maybe two questions. What does a caring family look like? I mean, most of us have never thought about that. Is your family a caring family? I want my family to be a caring family. But at the same time, when our kids were little, it was kind of World War III part of the time, and then part of the time, yeah, it was caring. And if you're like most families, you're just trying to make it through the day. I mean, the week, the month. Honestly, today we're going to talk about and look at virtues that can help your family care better and love longer. And yet again, for a lot of us, we haven't thought about virtues because, again, we're just trying to, like I said, get through the day. Well, my guest today is a friend of mine. His name is Dr. Aaron Santmyire, and we will be talking about his book, A Caring Family. Aaron is one of my faves. I love this man. He has spent the last 20-plus years serving as a missionary in Africa. Today he's in West Virginia, but usually he's in Africa. He hosts the Clarity Podcast, and I love his podcast. You've got to listen to it, the Clarity Podcast. That information is in our show notes. And he's married to his lovely wife and their kids, and they are actually empty nesters right now. And Aaron has a Doctor of Nursing degree from West Virginia University. I told him I was going to sing Almost Heaven in West Virginia, but you would not want me to do that. I just want to tell you that right now in this podcast world. He has an MBA from Southwestern Assemblies of God University. He's from the state of Almost Heaven, West Virginia, like I said. I've read two of his books, A Caring Life, which I loved, and this is A Caring Family that we're going to talk about. Both are great. Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
It's an honor and pleasure to be with you here today, and you have been a great friend and an investment in my life and missionaries around the world. So it's an honor to be with you here today.
Yeah, well, I feel a little pressure because your podcast is so good, and as you know, I loved your book, A Caring Family. I loved it. I wrote you after I read it and said you're an incredible storyteller, and the stories in your book are so insightful. But I learned some things about you that I never had learned by being on your Clarity Podcast. You mentioned right at the beginning of the book that you are a sleepwalker your entire life. I honestly laughed out loud at a story you told. One time you found yourself outside, or at least one time, maybe it was more, but you didn't tell us this, in the freezing cold in your boxers.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So, I grew up in a typical Assemblies of God home, and a lot of times the universities, the Assembly of God universities, their course people would come, and they came, and my parents would always volunteer. Our home is a place for people to come and stay. And so on this night, my parents did as they always did. I grew up in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath rancher home, and so it was me and my sisters, and that meant one of us was going to sleep downstairs in the basement, and that was me. And so they came home with us. In the middle of the night, I ended up having a dream that I was in the wrong person's house, and it was in the middle of the winter. I ran out the basement door down, about 400 yards to another house and got down there thinking that house was mine, and rang the doorbell a few times. This is past midnight, and knocked on the door. My parents didn't answer because they weren't in there, and so I thought I was just going to knock the door down. And so I rammed it once, and then I rammed it again, and on the third time, I looked in and saw that refrigerator in this house was, brown or green, not white like mine. And the door, looked at the door and realized that was not my door. And so honestly ran back down through to my house that was really my house, into the door, sat down on the couch and saying, this is all a bad dream. This is all a bad dream. This is all a bad dream. And looked down and had mud and grass all over my legs. And obviously it wasn't a bad dream. I was sleepwalking.
Is that amazing? And that is something that even to this day, is that something that periodically takes place?
It does. It does when I'm less and less. I think it's more when I'm stressed, different environment. Anyway, but less and less. But it was just a great way, I think, to begin the book, just to share and to challenge us. Yeah. No, anyway, I just had to tell that. I just wanted you to tell that story. It doesn't have a lot to do with a caring family or virtues. You're running around in boxers, banging on the door of somebody else in your boxers. That could have got you arrested, actually. Or shot.
But we're actually going to talk about something that wasn't really an arrest, but we are going to get into that. And I wrote the foreword to your book, A Caring Life, and that was such an honor for me. And I just love the topic of virtues. we don't think enough about virtues, and I haven't, and now I've been thinking about it since for most of the year. And the first virtue in your book was the virtue of loyalty. So I actually have a two-part question. One is, why did you write on virtues, and then why did you lead out, if there was any reason for this, with loyalty, which first in the lineup is stability. I mean, talk about that.
So I think I focused on virtues because I think that it was, as I look back, as I walk through my life, those were some things I parented. And 20 plus years after, I really wish that I would have started when I had kids focusing on these virtues and virtues that I wanted to see instilled in their life and who they were. And I started off with loyalty just because as I look across the landscape of what it means to be caring, and to have a caring family, the importance of loyalty. I think it's one of the foundations and the basis of it all. And loyalty it's become like an old-fashioned word, and I share this idea that when I talk with people, what do you think of the virtue of loyalty? They could tell you, well, you get loyalty points for somewhere, a store, or I love Chick-fil-A, or loyalty points there, but it's become something of a transactional term rather than something that's transformational. And I think that when we're loyal, it's a transformational in us, whether that's our relationship with Christ, whether that's caring for someone else, when we don't expect anything in return. But I think our culture has changed loyalty into something that I do this for you, I get a benefit for what I'm doing for you, and that's changed into a transactional term. And so I wanted that basis of that. And as I love to tell stories, and my family has been greatly transformed by this virtue of loyalty. And so that's why I led with that one. And I do believe it provides stability, right? It gives our families opportunities. It gives our kids opportunities to understand. I'm not asking people to be loyal to things that are immoral, illegal, or unethical. That's not what we mean by loyalty. But we are saying what it means to care for other people, even when there's no benefit to ourselves, even when we're not going to get anything in return, because this is what Christ has called us to do, and the basis of that beginning in the family.
Yeah. And, all of us want to be that loyal person, and then we want our children to be that too. We had an experience. While I had read your book, we do something at the Burns household every birthday. We go around the table and we share 3 good things. And Kathy's Enneagram, if you would, is loyalty. Her main deal is loyalty. And so we were all of us said loyalty. You are the most loyal person. And I think my daughters are more loyal because their mom is loyal. And she brings stability to the family. And after it was done, my wife looked and was just laughing. She goes, "I sound like a golden retriever. You made me sound like a golden retriever." But it's actually a great virtue, and I'm glad that you did that. And we don't have a whole lot of time, but you have to tell me what I'm going to call, I had this in my notes, the mom and the Marine story.
Sure. So, the high school I graduated from, 10th grade or 11th grade, they gave this award each year to one student for academics, service, and athletic ability. And, my name was the one chosen. So I told my mom and dad, I wanted them to come to see me to receive this award. Well, the day of, I got a call, I got called into the principal's office. And so the principal called me in. And he said, I need to share something with you. And he starts telling me this story that somebody had broken into the concession stand at the football field, and that, my name was I was the prime suspect in all of this caper. And, I thought it was a joke, and I started to laugh. I said, and he said, no, this is a serious matter. Your name, you're the prime suspect in this. And we're going to call the West Virginia State Police. They're going to come here. They're going to fingerprint you. We're going to make sure that this is not you. And I'm asking, like, why, what is the reason? He said, well, you give gum out, at lunchtime, and we think you're stealing the gum and then giving it out, at lunchtime. Well, we wait in there, and him and I are in the principal's office, and other people are milling in and out. Then the Marine that he comes and presents a flag, and they present this award. It's a plaque, and it's in front of the whole school in an assembly. Well, the Marine comes in, and then it's the principal and me, and he's asked awkward as you can imagine, and he says, the principal says, well, this is the person we thought was going to get the award, but there's concerns about his basically character, and so this is just like turning into this mess, and so some time passed, and then my mom comes in. And so my mom, she was loyal. There's no doubt about it. And I tell the story about her family in the beginning of the chapter. But it was something that I saw modeled in my family. So my mom comes in, and the principal starts telling my mom this story, and she wasn't having any of it. And so she said, she looked at me in the eye. She said, "Did you do this? I need you to tell me the truth." I said, "No, there's no way I did it." And so she looked at him and said, "He didn't do it, and he'll be getting the Marine Award today." And so that's kind of how that went, and a short version of it. But she talked to him. Obviously, they did all the fingerprinting and stuff. It wasn't me. It was somebody else. And I got the award that day. But my mom was someone that modeled loyalty in the family. Yeah. And I think it created this stability in the family that I knew that if I was standing for what was truthful, what was right, and my mom and my dad, they were loyal to me, and they were going to be there to give me that stability so I could grow in Christian character and to be the man that they wanted me to be.
And you have an amazing foundation, and you have an amazing ministry, but your spiritual foundation, and it comes partly because of that from your mom. Yeah. Your mom passed away in the middle of the writing of this book, or actually at the end of writing of this book.
Sure. Yeah.
So here you are still carrying something on because this woman was so loyal to you. And I'm glad you didn't get put in prison. I would have been the kid. If I was at your school, I'm older than you, I would have been the one who had, stolen this stuff.
Sure.
And I wouldn't have passed it out, though. I would have eaten all the gum or whatever it was. Let me move on. People don't write or speak enough, I don't think, about the virtue of what you called emotional honesty. That's a great phrase, by the way. I don't hear that phrase. I don't hear the word emotional honesty put together like that. Why do you think that's so important?
I think it's important for just because this is the book I wish that I would have read 20 years ago. Yeah. For me as a father, I spent a lot of my life as a father trying to put on a certain, not being emotionally honest, right? I didn't know how to define my emotions and my feelings and my mood. I didn't know how to have conversations with my children about those things. I didn't understand that part of it, and I wasn't honest. I was putting on a superficial idea of how I was truly doing. And so I think for me, it's important. I really wish I would have had those conversations to help my kids differentiate. Right? Your feelings, Chip Dodd says, your feelings are what? Right. There's when you're hurt, you're angry, you're lonely, you're fearful, you're sad, you're shame, guilty and glad, and just being able to help walk through what feelings were, that they're processed emotions, and that we have emotions, and that they are physiological responses, and we can choose how we respond. But I didn't have those opportunities, and I spent a lot of my time as a father trying to move my kids toward being glad, right? So if there was something going on in the house, or they had a difficult day in school, I would quickly try to move them from the reality of one of those other feelings to, hey, we live in Madagascar, life's awesome, there's lemurs here, look at the poinsettias, it's a blessing to be living in Madagascar. And I spent a lot of time not being emotionally honest with them, not with evil intent, not with I was trying to be manipulative, but in the same time, I didn't give them the space and model to them that they could be emotionally honest with me, and that I was secure enough to be able to hear it, listen to them, be with them in that season, and then help and walk with them through some of those more difficult feelings and emotions. Does that make sense?
It's so good. And I was just on a podcast, and somebody threw a question at me. The podcast was on teaching your children healthy sexual integrity. And yet they said, what is, for a parent, what is one of the most important traits? And I said authenticity, which goes right along with that.
Yeah, for sure.
And they said, this threw me, because they said they didn't expect me to say authenticity, but I think when parents are real, we don't have to be perfect. The Bible says the man or the woman of integrity walks securely, and I think they will. But that also brings security to their kids if they are authentic, if they have an emotional honesty. So it means we got to keep working on our own stuff. I really like that. Another one was courage. And you brought up Madagascar. There are, half of my listeners don't know where that is, but and you're not living there now. No. But Africa. So your ministry is in Africa. Do you think it takes more courage for you to be a person who's a missionary in Africa than living right now in West Virginia for a very short time? You're going back.
I don't know if it takes more. I think it maybe take a little bit different. And so I think there's areas that are different, and that causes you to need courage maybe in some different areas that maybe you wouldn't, or in the States. And honestly, coming back and living in the States, there's some areas that take more courage for me living back in the States than we're in Madagascar. And so I think it's probably a little bit. I do think wherever you're at, or a lifelong struggle for me has been fear, right? So Psalms 27:1 says what? That he is our light and our salvation, and whom shall we fear? He's the stronghold of our life, and whom shall we be afraid? And so I think as we look at this virtue of courage, laying a foundation, that this is really where our strength comes from. And it's not necessarily an inner motivation that comes from there, but our strength and our courage comes from that he's our light and our salvation. He's the stronghold of our life. And focusing on that, fear's been something I've struggled with. And, I think as a parent, if we want to care for others, just as being emotionally honest, if we need to be emotionally honest so we can care for people that are going through emotions that maybe and feelings that we're uncomfortable with, if we're only happy with if we could only care for people that are glad, well, that's only a small group of people we can care for. And so it takes courage then to be able to step into some difficult situations where people are going through challenges, and saying, this is where I get my strength from, and I need you to give me strength in this time, in this season. Right. And so I really wish, you look back, that I would have focused more on I'm a scientist, you mentioned, so I'm looking at the probabilities, looking at trying to get the things worked out, but not letting fear drive my actions, but let more of the courage that we have in Christ and to walk in that. So anyway, I could tell you stories all day long about adventures in Madagascar and Burkina Faso, but that would probably bore everybody. But anyway,
I don't think so.
Different courage. I don't think it's better. I think it's just different.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. But what I love how when you talk about courage, you talk about really for many of us as parents, I think we almost give up ourself for a season. You've just been through the teen years with your kids. And, you're so busy doing stuff, and you're busy in your work and your mission and whatnot. And then, your kids are taking all this time. And when they're younger, there's a different type of busyness. And so sometimes we don't take care of our own soul. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we make, that we have to do self-care for our own souls. And that actually is very courageous, because if you're going to be able to live out a courageous life, then you need the depth of it. Oftentimes I've said to people that, and I'm surely not using me as the primary illustration, because I'm surely in talk about trying to be authentic and say, I sure don't have it together all the time. But, a lot of times I say, it comes out of my 20 minutes with God. I read through since 1983, I've read through the 1 year Bible. That is not hyper spiritual. And by the way, it's every year, not just since 83. I've been trying to get through it. But I said, but I would say and I have a journal, and I go, I think some of my strength comes from that. Nobody sees that. Yeah. But that gives me courage to do the right thing when it comes to family. It gives me courage to do the right thing with work or ministry or the handling finances or handling temptations, whatever it might be. So to teach, for us to live with courage and then teach our kids courage. What's interesting about your book, A Caring Family, by the way, if you're on YouTube, here is the book. It's a great cover. There it is. I'm trying to show you that. Caring Family, 7 virtues that help your family care better and love longer. I love that subtitle. But I was telling you about this. I think it's a 10,000 foot. A lot of times we're so hungry for the 1 second help to discipline our kids that we don't take a step back and build courage into our family by looking at some virtues. So that's why I'm, so big on your book, and I really want to suggest that people, go out and get that book. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk more with Erin Santmyire. By the way, after we take this short break, we'll come right back to it. But you can get all the information on Erin's ministry, on A Caring Family, the book, where to get it, how to get it, and I really suggest that you do, in our show notes. So go to the show notes, and you'll get all that information that you need. We'll be right back. Don't go away. I'm Jim Burns. You're listening to HomeWord. Hi, everybody. Jim Burns here, and I wanted to invite you to HomeWord's Refreshing Your Marriage Conference. If you're in Southern California, or you can get to Southern California, it has been a couple years since we've been in SoCal, but it's a great conference. We have Doug Fields, who is, I think, the premier speaker on marriage, incredible content, plus he's hilarious. Lucille Williams, who's written a couple books on intimacy, as well as a premarital book. She's amazing, and she's also one of the speakers, and then yours truly. And it's actually one of the most fun conferences I do all year, and actually one of the most inspiring. So it's really, really cool. So I want to invite you. All the information is in our show notes for this day with the Rosbergs, and also then next week you can, in the next podcast, we'll have information on it as well. I'm in the middle of this. If you're getting this right at the beginning of us dropping this podcast, I'm on my way to Rice Lake, Wisconsin for this weekend, marriage conference. Austin, Texas the following week, marriage conference. And then the next week is Rome, Georgia at WindShape, which is the premier conference center, and with marriages. It's amazing. So I'm in the marriage mode today. And I hope you'll join us at the Refreshing Your Marriage Conference. It's just really a great time. Welcome back. I'm Jim Burns. Great conversation today. We're talking about building a caring family, and the book is called A Caring Family. It's by my friend, Dr. Erin Santmyire, and I just want to get as many of the virtues that I can done. Erin, how important is to a family is being spiritually focused? You use that as a virtue. I appreciate that. But you say that the spiritual focus provides hope and creativity.
Yeah.
So talk about that part.
I think, the reality of that we can only give what we have, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I've always found my source and strength to care for others is from the love and compassion of Jesus Christ. Yeah. And so I think that spiritually focused, I think something I share frequently is this. In somebody's testimony, I grew up in the church. I've never heard a testimony of somebody was angry, mean, and hateful to me. And I said, hey, I want to be like you. And they said, I'm a Christian. And then they said, hey, I want to be a Christian like you, and I want to follow Jesus, right? True. It doesn't happen. But at least I've not heard it. But I think being spiritually focused, it gives us opportunities to walk into a situation. We were talking about walking into situations in Madagascar or Kenya or in West Virginia or I was just in Colorado, and you want to care, but you don't necessarily know how to do it. And you're trying to sense, God, are you asking me to step in and to care for this situation or these people in this situation? And God, I need your guidance and direction. And being able to sense his direction and how to do that, and then to give you creative ways to do it. I think for me, a lot of times I care for other people the way that I want to be cared for myself, but that's not always the best way, right? And so I think sensing and asking God for direction in those times, in those seasons, it gives me strength to do it, right? It's the source ability to care for other people. It gives us an opportunity to share the love of Christ with others. And then I think it also gives me guidance in the process, and as we care for others, and just asking him for the way to go.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about that is, and it's all right and so good. And I actually appreciate, our podcast, we have people who are not necessarily Christians yet. And I appreciate them hearing from you, your perspective on that, because we're not jamming it down their throats here. But the truth is that a spiritually focused family, their kids, they get better grades. Yeah. They're going to be less involved in drug and alcohol abuse. There's research that shows some of this stuff. But speaking for them, but also speaking for people who are in the church, why do you think so many families feel so inadequate with this virtue when it comes to helping their kids be spiritually focused?
I think sometimes we feel uncomfortable. I think we don't necessarily know how to have the conversations. Just that idea of sensing what maybe God would be directing me to do, right? It's saying that I'm going to open myself up and I'm not gonna be in control, right? He's omnipotent, he's all powerful, he's in control, he's omniscient, he knows all the answers, he's omnipresent, he's everywhere. And so I think in those times, saying we need his direction. Psalms 32:8 is one that I pray a lot of times. God, guide and direct me in the way I should go. Counsel me with your loving eyes upon me, as we care for people and we want our kids to learn to do that. As I travel and speak, what I learn a lot is, I think sometimes parents in our family were uncomfortable because there's a little bit of sense of fear of what if God asks us, or we feel God sensing us to do something, and it pushes us maybe a little bit beyond. A lot of times people come up after I speak and they'll say, I'm concerned about sharing with our family to see how God would direct us, because maybe maybe God's going to want my son to go to Africa like you. So like Africa's like the worst place, the worst thing that's ever going to happen. But I do think it's just letting people know that, within our kids, that God cares about the details of their life. That God's nearer than they imagine. That He's there. That He does want to walk with them and guide them and help them in those times and in those seasons. And what I've learned in a caring family is I don't always get it right. And so you want to do your best, but you don't always get it. And knowing that we serve a Heavenly Father that is grace-filled. And as you said, Jim, I'm not trying to push the love of Christ down anybody's throat. This book is not just for Christians. These virtues would carry through to people that are followers of Christ and are not followers of Christ. I can just share from my personal testimony, and as I share through the book, my family has been dramatically changed when you look at it from the love of Jesus Christ. And so that being spiritually focused points back and saying He's radically transformed our lives in more ways than I can ever imagine. And as I share on this chapter, being spiritually focused, encouraging parents, if you don't know where to start, think about how God has helped you along the way. Think about stories maybe from your parents or your grandparents. I tell stories of the miraculous things that God has done in our family's life. And I think when my kids were growing up, that I would have had more the ability to slow down and quit focusing on trying to get those P's, power, prestige, and position, and all the things that I thought were important. And I think Arthur Brooks says, we can be unique and special. And I spent a lot of time trying to be unique and special, but I missed out on those opportunities of being loved and known. And and I think being spiritually focused would have given me opportunities to share what God has done in our lives, how He's brought us to this point, how He's transformed our lives, and then how we as a family have the opportunity to be an opportunity that, not, as you said, not pushing the gospel down people's throat, but at the same time caring for people in the way and the compassion and love of Jesus Christ. And so I think that gives us this ability to do that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the interesting side to it is, all of us feel inadequate when it comes to trying to energize our family spiritual life or whatever. Sure. It is our job. But we also, goes back to that idea of authenticity. Sometimes you just have to say, I don't always get this right. Yeah. Because I think sometimes we don't do that because they saw us blow it, or they saw us have anger where anger didn't need to be, or whatever. And sometimes we just have to simply say, "Hey, buddy, sorry. I blew that one out. That was not about you. That was more about me and what I'm going through." And that actually is a witness to our family or even to other people. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Now, we have something in common. I'm going to give a drum roll here that we've never talked about, and that's a very slimy, stinky thing called trout.
Oh, yes.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
But I love, I go fishing once a year. I'm in a small group. Okay. I've been in it for 21 or 22 years, and we go trout fishing every year together. And one of the guys, he's really into it, and so we go to amazing spots in Montana, and we're going to go to Alaska this year. And I'm not suffering. I'll just tell you on the on whatever. But you use the illustration of catching a trout by fishing to learn more about the virtue of patience.
Sure.
Talk about that.
So, when I was a kid, my dad and I, we would go up into the mountains of West Virginia to go trout fishing. And we did a lot of fishing, not a lot of catching. And so but it was good times together. One year we went up, caught the biggest trout of my life. I was prouder than you could be, prouder than a peacock, as we would say in West Virginia. And so, I'm thinking about getting this trout mounted, how it's going to be the best thing ever. And lo and behold, the game warden comes down. He approaches me. I didn't know that we were doing anything wrong. So, I get the trout out. I show it to him. And then he begins to take the trout off the stringer. It was still alive. He lets it swim away, and he begins to tell me that we're in catch and release, and I'm not allowed to keep these fish. This fish is going to die, and I was using illegal bait. And so, my excitement all of a sudden went way, way down. Right. And he said, but I'm going to need to spend some time with your father up here in the vehicle, and I need you to sit here and be patient. And, that was one of my first memories of being patient. It seemed like eternity that I was sitting there waiting for my dad to come back. It is a long story. He ended up having to go pay a big fine or get put in jail for 3 days. It was a mess. But I realized, and as I've walked, patience is an action verb. And a lot of my life is I'm a doer, and I like action. But sometimes when I'm being patient, I don't feel like that I'm doing anything, but actually I am. Yeah. And learning that in our families to help in a world that I think is probably more anxious than it ever has been, waiting and being patient is a virtue, right? It's a virtue to say that we don't necessarily have to be in constant motion or constant forward motion. One of the beauties of our family living in Madagascar is life shut down every evening at 6 p.m. And so we had those family times together that was such a value. And
that's amazing. Now life shuts down because electricity shuts down.
Exactly, and the bus is shut down, and it wasn't necessarily being safe to be out, and so life shut down, and so we were at home, and we had those opportunities together. Yeah, but I do think focusing in a family and giving the opportunity, giving the space to listen and hear is valuable.
It's great. Now we don't have much time left, but I want you to unpack transformational awareness.
Yeah,
love that phrase again too.
So transformational awareness, Steve Cuss has taught me a lot about this idea that, we there's probably more out. You mentioned Enneagram on becoming self-aware. There's Enneagram. There's all these different tests that we can take that know ourselves better. And that's valuable, right? And then there's about knowing others. We can learn how to know others. And then we can learn about cultural awareness, which is what I've spent a lot of my life trying to understand how to care cross-culturally. And as America becomes more multicultural, that's of utmost importance. And then it's also becoming more aware of where God's at in certain situations. So it's not just being aware of those 4 areas, but it's saying I want to take all 4 of those, and I'm asking God to transform me and to transform the situation as I walk in it. And so that's how you get to transformational awareness and the importance of that. It's not just enough just to be self-aware or others aware, and be able to give a great apology. It's not enough to know that there's different cultures out there, and they maybe would be valued more to care differently than the way I would as a boy growing up in Wally Ford, West Virginia, or that that God is there. But how do we walk through it and help our families understand all those types of awareness, and so that we can be transformed and God can transform us in the process. In this process of being a caring family. No,
so good. It's actually there's a theological term called sanctification, which is the process of growing in our faith throughout our life, and we never really reach it per se. Yeah. And that's different than the theological term justification, which is more about our salvation, our relationship with Jesus. But this is the process, and I really, really love the book. I am not just saying this; I really do. Thank you so much for writing the book. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being involved in the mission field, for being such an inspiration. The Clarity podcast is awesome. I suggest people go to our show notes and take a look at how they could listen to the Clarity podcast. Honestly, you've been an inspiration from the day I met you. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Well, great. Hey, before you go, I want to talk just briefly about kind of a cool principle that relates directly to what we've been talking about today. And it's really a discipleship method with our kids, but it fits, especially as I was saying that, of course we want virtues, and we want these 7 virtues in our life. And it doesn't just happen without being intentional about it, right? So, I want to give you what I call the 4 phases of ease, moving from dependence on you toward independence. And really, that I don't care if you have a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old or an 18-year-old, we're moving from dependence on us toward independence. And the way for them to learn these virtues is first and foremost for us to live it out. That's actually right out of the Bible, Deuteronomy 6. 4 through 9 talks about that. But these four phases, what we call of ease, is number one, I do it and you watch. So this works, by the way, if you're teaching your kids prayer, you're teaching your words, any of these virtues, or making their bed, right? I do it and you watch. We don't take the time sometimes, and then we just all of a sudden realize that, no, we need to train them. So I do it, you watch. I do it, you do it. So in other words, you do it together. Then you do it, meaning your child starts to learn these virtues, and you actually put them in intentionally into these, and I assist. So it doesn't mean you go away, but I assist, and then you do it, so that now they own it. And I think that's a great phrase, the I do it, you watch, I do it, you do it, I assist, and you do it. So the four phases of ease. Is that confusing because I'm using the word phase and phrase? Yeah, it probably is. But anyway, it's good stuff. Okay, again, my thanks to Aaron. He's a great guy. I hope you pick up his book, A Caring Family. There it is, if you're watching on YouTube. Interestingly enough, I went to our site to see what our top international listeners in Africa are, and I was shocked. There's all kinds of people in Africa who are listening to this podcast, and so I greet you. I've actually I give shout-outs to the people who speak Spanish in the Spanish-speaking world, in various parts of Europe, definitely in Asia and China and whatnot, but to those of you in Africa, it is an absolute honor that you listen to this podcast. And for all of you, you can go back and listen to other podcasts as well. But thanks for listening today and or watching on the YouTube channel. And I am so grateful for you, and I'm grateful for Aaron today. Until next time, I'm Jim Burns. Blessings to you.